The build up to Salvation's Edge was nothing short of extraordinary, and almost a decade in the making. Yet when the fateful day arrived, the world of gaming was left feeling both shocked and annoyed that the crowning moment of the Light and Dark saga was all but ruined. Countless teams and creators had gone from showing the game, the progress, and the race to eventually showing nothing at all. Thousands of viewers around the globe descended into a blackout, but this wasn't a technical fault or a power outage. It was deliberate. To the more casual fans or returning, this was shocking and almost unbelievable. But to the more acquainted raid race enjoyers, this was unfortunately not a shock nor a surprise at all. A competitive cauldron had been bubbling for years amongst the world's first raiders, with teams gradually hiding more and more information from viewers, until it would eventually boil over into a complete blackout at really the worst time possible. So where did the blurring, muting, and hiding screens all begin? Why is it happening? And most importantly, will it ever stop?
No.
Contrary to popular belief, raid racing hasn't always been a thing in Destiny. Back in 2014, when the Vault of Glass launched, barely any players even knew what the activity was. Even less were properly leveled to take on the challenge, and those who were had more to focus on than any sort of race against each other. At this time, Bungie weren't clearly incentivizing speed and racing, with no raid belts or even emblems for completions, and of course, contest difficulty was still years away. That's not to say that the competitive spirit didn't quickly blossom amongst the raiding community though. The existence of a placement leaderboard alone incentivized teams to push for a top spot, as well as collect that sweet raid loot before anyone else. The reality is that this took less than a year for many to be engulfed by raid race fever, as by the time King's Fall came around in the fall of 2015, it was clear how important raid racing had become for Destiny.
Not yet. Yeah,
Front, it comes.
Front. No damage. Chest. Yes! Fuck! Yes! Whoa! Oh my fucking god! Bitches! Suck my dick!
By this point in Destiny, it was no doubt a race for top-end players, with the grand reward of bragging rights. Despite this competitive nature, there is no real record of screen hiding, buff blurring, or muting in any Destiny 1 raid race, but there may be one team who wishes that they did. There was actually a team leading Broman's team in King's Fall before wiping to the brand new Final Stand mechanic. However, chatters from this stream found their way to T-Rex's stream to alert the team that there was a twist coming up in the Oryx fight.
I hear we have to hit him again after he's done, so just be wary, be ready.
I have literally I have one sniper shot.
This undoubtedly helped Broman's team become world's first champions in King's Fall, and first foreshadowed the dangers of streaming your runs to the world, and consequently leaking mechanics to your competitors. By the time Destiny 2 launched to the world, raid race fever had infected the whole community. As the Leviathan first opened up to players, top teams raced, hardcore fans competed, and some players were just there for the vibes.
There's a dog on the left.
Oh! You polonize something and you give it the light for it to use photosynthesis.
Raid Race Day had quickly turned into a complete schedule clearer for many, as fans around the world gathered to watch the chaos unfold. However, it wouldn't be until Last Wish that Bungie themselves helped to properly propel the concept of a race. Up until Forsaken, the language in trailers would always present the raid as beginning or opening, while the trailer for Last Wish was the first to officially announce the concept of a world's first race. Bungie were willing to even go a step beyond that. The elusive, golden, wrestling style world's first belt would officially be up for grabs and claimed by the team who conquered the raid first, with these retrospective belts as the reward to the winners of all previous races too. An incentive would also be there for those who completed within the first 24 hours too, providing an incentive for those other than the top 1% to clear their calendars too. The existence of this belt and emblem instantly changed the dynamic of the DLC and raiding, with teams prepping harder than ever to the Dreaming City, and it soon became clear that Last Wish was the perfect playground for the inaugural official race. As a few hours in, the first teams entered an encounter that would change the history of raid racing forever: the Vault. If you guys want some energy for the next raid race, make sure to use code EVAN at checkout for gamer subs. A puzzle of this magnitude had never been added to any raid in Destiny before, as teams were used to DPS focused encounters with much more minor tasks to complete to reach a damage phase. While one team had a glorious stroke of luck and brute forced the encounter, the rest of the community scrambled to solve this devious creation. This encounter would turn out to be pivotal, as it would be the first time we would see teams cut audio and communication to hide their theories behind the encounter's solution. Data would turn off stream audio and later clear the encounter, and in doing so, may have unknowingly opened Pandora's box. Unfortunately for Math Class, this small advantage would not lead to a victory, with Dato's team falling infamously short of both the world's first belt and the day one emblem. Muting the stream was certainly confusing for many viewers at the time, but it never became a significant talking point as the community were just so in awe of the sheer scale of Last Wish itself, as over 21 million stream hours were watched in the first month of Forsaken, with the world's first race itself heavily contributing towards that. Bungie would yet again up the ante upon the release of Crown of Sorrow, this time introducing a contest modifier to greatly increase the difficulty of day one, but more importantly, level the power playing field, as not to favor those who had excessively prepared. Raid racing both on the playing and viewer side would continue to grow through all these changes, with almost 170,000 concurrent viewers watching the fall of Galron, and 225,000 watching the Sanctified Mind crumble into the Vex Mill. By the time 2020 rolled around, raid racing had become so serious for some teams that they would practice under-leveled content beforehand and employ a 7th or even 8th member into the fire team to, quote, scout for them. This role sounds exactly like what it is: a coach or another voice separate from the team playing that is in charge of finding other teams in the lead and relaying that information to their team to catch up. This isn't uncommon to other raid racing games, but again, Destiny raid races are a day long, not a week-long event, so the role quickly became controversial. Scouts were slowly making their way to the mainstream upon the launch of Deepstone Crypt, as over 400,000 viewers on Twitch alone watched the destruction of Taniks for like the 50th time, or however many times we've killed him at this point. While scouting had sort of unofficially always been a thing, as we mentioned with Broman's completion of Kingsfall, Deepstone Crypt and the later Vaulted Glass remaster showed how fragile raid race leads could be in the world of raid racing. Through their own skill and team coordination, Elysium had blitzed through normal mode VoG remaster, as well as the Oracles and Templar challenge encounters, before finding themselves stuck at the freshly revamped Gatekeepers challenge. However, the commanding lead they had over all the other teams made it seem all but inevitable that they would still comfortably claim the win despite the small roadblock, until the role of scouts reared its controversial head into the community. Scouts for other teams watched through Elysium's challenge completions and relayed this information to their teams, equalizing Elysium's lead. Many would consider this as a foul play, and many thought Bungie should step in on this, but the majority quickly realized how this would be almost impossible to regulate, and therefore scouting was here to stay. I spoke to world's first winner Quaz from Team Elysium about this, and he had this to say, quote, "We first had a scout for VOW as we didn't have one for VoG, and since we nearly lost due to other scouts finding the Gatekeepers challenge from us, and we figured if all these other teams had a scout, we should have one too, so our chances to win aren't lowered." I remember seeing pictures on Twitter of scouts saying, "I'm prepared for day one," and having 5+ monitor setups with all different streams showing how much additional info one person can give. Bungie premiered Vow the Disciple to over 300,000 viewers on Twitch, and also about 300,000 error codes as well. Network-related issues dominated this race more than anything, and many in the community thought this race should be cancelled or restarted due to the issues disproportionately affecting some teams and members of the community. However, scouting no doubt helped as Elysium climbed back here from hours of error codes to claim world's first. But it's important to remember that just because scouting exists and muting exists doesn't mean you're guaranteed a win. Team Ascend had been at the final raid boss for hours, and Elysium won, proving execution and skill still remain the most important attribute in World's First races. It would be ignorant for me to pretend that my own creation Raid Zone hasn't had some influence on how things would play out. Watching, tracking, and streaming the progress of teams unintentionally serves as a scouting hub for some. And while Raid Zone does so much good and receives a lot of support from those who just want to watch the race, it also does have the possibility to pressurize some teams into obscuring information. Although, with the existence of scouts in the mainstream now, I would argue that this information would just be shared anyway. The King's Fall remaster would be unfortunately the last raid race without having screen or audio obstruction, which is somewhat poetic when you remember that the original King's Fall was the first raid to have the result heavily impacted by information sharing. Now, over 500,000 concurrent viewers tuned in for the Root of Nightmares raid, the highest ever Twitch viewership in Destiny history. But as fans tuned in to track the race and cheer their favorite teams on, most were met with silence and obscured visuals. However, with a raid race as bad as Ron, it's probably not the worst thing in the world it was blocked out anyway. You could argue that this was the natural progression of raid racing. We will break down the morals and opinions around muting and blocking later into the video, but however you feel about it, the stream obstructions still didn't really take center stage on day one, as many were so stunned at how far Root of Nightmares fell below expectations. And with Clan Luminous steamrolling Bungie's poor attempt at a contest raid in just over 2 hours, screens weren't even blocked for that long anyway. At this stage in the video, you may start to realize a pattern in that the competitiveness and extent teams were willing to go to win escalates raid after raid since all the way back in 2015. However, other factors were somewhat blocking screen hiding, muting, or scouting from becoming mainstream news. Fast forward to June of 2024, and the stage was set for Destiny's grand finale. Bungie had promoted this DLC more than any other, therefore pushing the raid race more than any other. Contest mode was active, and World's First raid belts were the most prestigious to date, as the 6 Guardians to claim it would be immortalized in history as the first team to slay Destiny's decade-long villain and open up the mission that would complete Destiny's infamous Light versus Dark saga. The raid started with many teams blurring buffs and muting audio from the start, which wasn't entirely new, but the amount of teams starting this way and what this would quickly develop into was unprecedented. Teams began to reach the infamous Verity encounter in about 4 to 6 hours into the raid, and as soon as teams realized this was a puzzle-heavy encounter, just like Datto and Vault in 2018, teams began to further limit what viewers could see and hear until the cauldron finally boiled over, and we ended up in a complete blackout. And by the time teams reached the witness, next to no one with any significant progress had their stream watchable. Viewers who had been waiting for this day felt robbed of this moment, and for the first time ever, it felt like there was a complete disconnect between those watching the race and those competing. Because of this, by the time the raid was eventually completed by Team Parabellum, the hype of the moment was all but gone, and there was no buildup of excitement as viewers watched teams draw closer. The fallout and reaction of the Destiny community started to pour in, and they were not happy. Many felt robbed that the pinnacle event in the Destiny calendar had been completely ruined, while others had little to complain about, thus sparking one of the largest debates we have ever seen in Destiny history. By the time Desert Perpetual came out around a year later, large portions of the community were anxious that the screen obscuring would ruin the race right from the very start. While some teams did hide their screens, it quickly became apparent that this raid was mechanically relatively simple, and very much a raid that required perfect DPS execution to complete instead. As such, the role of blurring screens didn't impact the viewing experience anywhere near as much as in Salvation's Edge, with even the eventual World's First team unblurring their screens before completion, once they realized that the mechanics were out in the open. In this final section, I want to really break down both sides of the argument. I want to try to come at this from a very neutral angle, as my goal is not to change anyone's opinion, but instead outline the argument on both sides and give everyone further points to consider, as in debates like this, people can often tunnel vision into their own argument a bit too much. First and foremost, it's incredibly important to best try and define what a raid day and raid race is meant to be, as this will ultimately be the biggest factor in deciding what side of the fence you will sit on. When Vaulted Glass launched in 2014, there was undoubtedly a more community feel to completing the raid, as the concept of a raid race did not exist in Destiny. However, since Forsaken, it's clear Bungie have heavily embraced the competitive side of PvE Destiny. Promoting the world's first race in trailers very much seems like a concerted effort to get more viewers to watch the race on Twitch, whereas the implementation of contest mode, stricter raider rules, and a belt seems like a player-focused effort to make the race more balanced and incentivized for competitors. What's a little bit more up for debate is whether Bungie are implementing these competitor-focused measures to tighten the race for a viewer experience or to upkeep competitive integrity. For the lack of Bungie's interference on the screen hiding front, this has been the smoking gun piece of the evidence leading the argument that the raid is a competitor-first event. As if Bungie felt like the race was becoming something that they didn't want, they would speak up. Despite this, it is easy to also see the disappointed viewer POV too. Raid races have the prestige and hype around them that they do, largely because of the viewers that tune in. It's unlikely raid belts, contest mode, or day one emblems would have been a thing if thousands of viewers didn't tune in for hours upon hours to watch the earlier raids be solved for the first time. Viewers argue that if racers really wanted to hide their strats and refrain from competitive disadvantage, they just wouldn't stream at all, just like Team Parabellum and Salvation's Edge. Large numbers of teams stream because they want to capitalize the increased viewership, the hype, and ultimately the revenue that descends upon the Destiny community when a world's first race begins.
We've got to have money.
This creates the understandable argument that the racers must choose between views and competitive advantage. While there isn't a monetary prize to speak of, many racers have used successful World's First days to propel their streaming career, with World's First Raider Sweatsicle even commenting on this in a recent video.
Really wanting to win is one thing, but like understanding that like winning a raid race means a lot more than just winning it, I guess. Or it can. Because like, I don't know, speaking from personal experience, it's like I made an entire career off of it.
However, like how we started this video talking about black screens, your accomplishment can never truly be appreciated in the same way if nobody was able to live that moment with you and put a name to a moment that they will never forget. You'll just become blacked out in their mind about the day. If anything, the same fame you want to acquire is now turned to frustration from the viewer's perspective. There is, however, a counter argument to this from the racer's perspective though. While there is always the narrative that blurring and muting ruins the viewer experience, thousands continue to lurk or chat in the streams of creators, even with the most obscured experiences. Dados still kept thousands of viewers even while muted with full face cam in Salvation's Edge, as did Elysium and Team John, as they stream with completely muted and blurred screens. The argument remains that surely if people were that offended by blurred screens, they just wouldn't watch at all. But the reality is that many still stick through regardless. And when this is the case, why would a racer ever consider changing that? Screen blurring is the ideal middle ground to many racers, as it allows them to maintain a competitive advantage, but then still unmute and unblur to lap up the glory when they do get their completion. And without any Bungie intervention, it's hard to stop anyone from doing that. The reality is that some players play games to the best of their ability to become the top 0.1% and have their name etched into history, and therefore they're willing to do anything it takes to claim that glory. However, when it's the viewers who have ultimately created this high stakes environment, it does seem unfair to completely rob them of the experience of watching it. And it's more than fair to argue that in a time when Destiny is struggling for viewership and a player base, obscuring viewers from engaging with the pinnacle of Destiny content is not only wrong, but it's just a stupid thing to do for the future of the game. How are viewers meant to become more engaged in a game if racers are blocking the viewer from seeing all it has to offer? While trailers help to market a game publicly, watching trusted or respected players play the game is equally, if not more, important at upkeeping the player count and the longevity of the game. Lots of racers want the fame of being a world's first raider, as there are plenty of examples of these teams that have their careers propelled by in-game achievements. But it's more important to note that these players had their careers propelled not only because they were first, but more so because people could watch them be first. And there are plenty of examples with creators like Macdix who have had their careers propelled, not because they won the race, but because they made progress in the raid while not obscuring their screens at all, as his team was one of the first to reach Taniks in Deepstone Crypt, but falling just short of World's First, but claiming a top 6 finish and a lot of long-term viewers and respect. Finally, while no one can argue that streaming unobscured raid racing is a competitive disadvantage, it's actually impossible to quantify how much of a disadvantage it becomes. Ultimately, it's only a disadvantage if you discover information that no one else has. Hiding screens and having scouts doesn't guarantee a raid race victory, with some encounters being easy to solve and hard to execute, like the Witness Contest or Spire of Stars final boss, while others are the polar opposite, being hard to discover and easy to execute, like Sundered Doctrine's final boss. The latter is a strong argument for hiding screens, as teams found themselves stuck for ages trying to solve the mechanic for Kareb in Sundered Doctrine, but cleared it almost instantly once it was discovered. You only have to look at the placement leaderboard to realize that the floodgates really opened once Mario, Luigi, and Biggs discovered how to start and survive the damage phase. Had this team failed, they would have surely lost the race after exposing the mechanic to the whole community, whereas hiding their screen would have provided some insurance for the execution of the mechanic. The former example is a little harder to justify on a screen hiding front. When the mechanic is all but out in the open and it's a team's DPS, coordination, and survivability that's being tested, there is much less of an advantage gained from hiding your screen, as it tends to rely a little bit more on skill and communication. In both circumstances, however, unobscured screens create a better viewing experience. Watching teams wipe over and over until a team finally survives the onslaught, edges closer phase after phase, and then finally takes down a boss is awesome. It's equally as awesome watching teams struggle for hours to find the key to the puzzle and then watching to see who can race through the completion first, however. Ultimately, however, it's hard to see anything changing anytime soon. Competitive integrity is clearly important to both racers and Bungie alike, and therefore there's not likely to be any rules that dramatically improve the viewing experience anytime soon. And I do think it's important that viewers understand that a blurred stream is still better than no stream at all. And for the top 0.1% of the community, any advantage that can be taken will be claimed. Despite this, I think it's important that Bungie monitor how this situation develops moving forward. Over the past decade, things have changed a lot in the world of raid racing, and if it continues to travel exclusively towards a purely competitor-focused day, viewers may quickly become alienated to an extreme level and start to completely kill the hype for the best day in Destiny, and consequently damage the future of the game. Whatever the future holds, it's important that both sides of the argument remain respectful to one another, which can be hard online for some people. I hope this video has provided some new points of view for you, and I look forward to grabbing some popcorn and reading the comments down below. Thank you for watching, follow my socials, and make sure you're subscribed.